Hi, I'm Tom, and I'm here to talk to you about the history of girls kissing in anime. More or less with a lot of other things. No, we're going to explore, over this next hour, we're going to explore the history of Yuri as a genre, how it came to exist, where it came from, the tropes that have run through that period, run through all that period, how they've evolved, and look at some of the major turning points and examples that went in there. And alongside that, we'll track a little subtext of... Subtext? Good word for Yuri. We'll track a little sub-channel, shall we say, on LGBT rights in Japan and how those have evolved over time as well. So I hope you find it interesting. I hope you go away learning something, even if it's just the names of some good series to go and watch. Let's get started. So I'm going to start off with setting some baselines for discussion. What do I, for understanding, what do I mean by Yuri? And we're going to use this as our definition. You may be familiar with Yuri as a name for 18 plus content or erotic content in particular. That's been used in Western circles for quite a while. It doesn't really have any relationship back to the word as it exists in Japan and as it's used in Japan. In fact, you might have heard that word used, or that phrase used in the West. I wouldn't. Shoujo refers to a young girl or a virgin, and shoujo-ai, if you happen to go into a Japanese bookstore and ask for some shoujo-ai books, you'll get erotic books about relationships between adult men and prepubescent girls. Oh. So, strong recommend. That might not be the title you want to use all the time. It's up to you. I can't change your vocabulary, but I just thought I would let you know that there's maybe some connotations you're not super high on, or maybe you are. I would normally say I'm not judging, but I am. In this case. The term Yuri originally came from a column in a gay men's magazine, which was called Yurizoku no Heya, or the Yuri Tribe's Room, to differentiate it from the men's magazine, which was called Barazoku, or the Rose Tribe, as opposed to the Lily Tribe. And it was a phrase used by there were phrases used by the LGBT community in Japan to self-describe, which I think is another reason why I prefer to respect the word definition that people have chosen for themselves, even if its use in Japan has actually drifted a lot over time, as we will learn. So, let's move on. Let's get some starting points. Again, in 1880, homosexuality became legal in Japan, which was nice. It had only been illegal for 7 years, and that was all our fault. It was made illegal based after they imported a lot of Western attitudes in the late 1800s. After which they decided this is bullshit and threw that out. So, although it's been legal, there's been a checkered history of actual representation and understanding in Japan. In general, relationships between men, particularly between older men and younger men, seen as a sort of part of mentorship at points, existed and were taken seriously, but historically relationships between women weren't. There has been a strong undercurrent in Japanese society again, around what we'll call the first relationship myth. This was an ideal that it was considered good for a girl's first relationship to be with another girl, because that way she could have her first experiences with love in a relationship that would never matter, couldn't go anywhere, and she couldn't get pregnant or get hurt. Which, I mean, makes me want to vomit, frankly, that sort of attitude. But nonetheless, I think it's important to start out with, to set out where we come into our understanding of lesbian relationships in fiction and how they were seen in society. As we go on, we'll sort of track back and check in regularly on how things have evolved. Let's start back there then. Let's start with the very first set of the tropes that I can find. But way back in 1919, so just over 100 years ago. If you wanted to read Yoshio Nobuko's first story, you'll find it's remarkably similar to a lot of things that you'll have seen before. Two Virgins in the Attic tells the story of two girls at an all-girls Catholic school. One of them develops a crush on the other, which she believes is one-sided, until realizing that it's not. They share a private room in the school's tower, and one of the climactic scenes has them playing an intimate piano duet together. And if that sounds very familiar, that's because it is. There's a reason I say this is the origin of many of the tropes. Yoshio-san and a few other authors around her time described what they were doing, what they were writing as SK, or the S aesthetic. Interestingly enough, many of them didn't think of what they were writing as lesbian fiction. They thought what they were writing was more about exploration of sisterhood and found families. What modern readers may interpret into it, or indeed what others of them may have seen, is different. It wasn't until many years later, a good 50-odd, that we started to see something in manga, because we had to wait for manga to be invented, which kind of important before we can start getting Yuri manga, right? They just drew the pictures in the air and it didn't work. No, we had to wait until manga was invented and established and came together. So nothing much happened in there. Truth told, there wasn't nearly as much manga produced back then, and so there wasn't nearly as much space for exploring different concepts and different ideas. I want to start out in the 1960s with something that wasn't even a Yuri. And you'll find we do a few of these detours. Ribbon no Kishi, or Princess Knight, tells the story of a princess who was born with a girl's body and a boy's mind. And it doesn't tell, it's not a Yuri story in that there are no girls that fall in love with the princess. On the other hand, I think it's very relevant for a number of ways. It set up an archetype of the girl prince, or the girl knight, which we will see recur a number of times and find its way very tightly into Yuri over time. It also had an anime, which looks very 60s, as you can see. And yeah, although it's not necessarily Yuri, I don't think anyone would deny that there are definitely some queer narratives going on in there that we can explore, and there is definitely a panel about gender representation and transgender representation in Japanese media to be written somewhere that I don't know if it's to be written by me or not, but I'm sure someone should. So we'll skip on a little bit further to 1971, where A White Room for Two took exactly the same tropes that Yoshio-san wrote wrote about 50 odd years before, 60 years before by that point, and told us them again. In this, Raisin in front is an orphan who is sent to, guess what? A remote all-girls boarding school, where she ends up sharing a room with Simone, the scene at the back there, and Simone takes advantage of her and makes her, not in a sexual way, I hasten to add, but takes advantage of her in making her run errands and etc. etc. And the two of them have an awkward relationship until eventually they're chosen to play Romeo and Juliet and share a kiss on stage, and the rest, they say, is history. The series continues, but this is the first. White Room for Two very much took the SK aesthetic and went, oh, could just draw pictures about this, and they did. And it set that aesthetic in stone as a part of the genre of Yuri. This is about the same time that the word Yuri was invented. After that, it all went wrong for a lot of people, but mostly for all of the protagonists. A White Room for Two actually has a reasonably upbeat ending. It's very unclear whether the two of them are a couple or not. If you don't want spoilers for like 50-year-old series, I'm sorry, but also I feel like there's a statute of limitations thing here going on, right? Most protagonists in the late 70s and 80s didn't have nearly so good an ending. Everyone died. Tragic romances were the name of the game, and they happened to men, they happened to women, they happened to ducks, they happened to whatever, you name it, it's all there. However, as is usual in all of these things, girls got it worse. Because in addition to dying and everything else, they also got arranged marriage off with men and all sorts of other things. It was very rare for a series around this time to have any level of remotely showcasing a happy ending, which of course perpetuated and was perpetuated by our first relationship myth that we talked about back at the start. It reinforced that. And it reinforced the genre as one that was about, it was about coming out of, at the time, about coming out of childhood. It was about people's first relationships, growing up. It wasn't really about romance, and it really wasn't really about lesbians. That said, there were some good things that we can talk about. Rose at First Sight came out, which I can hear some appreciation for. And we saw drawing from Ribbon no Kishi 10 years earlier, 15 years earlier, around about that. We saw a girl, in this case, being raised, again, we saw a girl being raised as a boy. In this case, there were actually some girls who were interested in her, which was good. There were also some boys interested in her, and the series doesn't really solidly make a decision on that. At least the old series didn't. I haven't actually seen or read the new one, so maybe someone can tell me I'm wrong. But the new one was also made after, in 2010 or so, like early 2000s. So a bit of a different time from the 1970s, 1980s. And we saw a lot of this. Shows like manga like Boku no Shotaiken, Claudine, and Paros no Ken all featured girls who were raised as boys, wanted to become boys, magically got changed into boys, etc., etc. Or just wanted to become boys. All of those happened. And further cemented that stereotype of, well, the prince who is a girl, the girl who is attractive in a slightly masculine way. On the other hand, touching into reality for a second, it was at least a better time to be a woman in Japan, as the sexual revolution of the 70s hit, and a lot of women were able for the first time to hold jobs more seriously and things like that. It would take a long time for things to really change, and there are still a lot of cultural issues. But it's important to note that there were women's rights coming in at this point at the same time. In terms of where we were finding this, we were finding all of this in some very niche publications. None of them Yuri focused, those didn't exist yet and won't for a long time, but none of this was mainstream. Even Rose at Versailles, which did take off fairly well, started out with a fairly small circulation. And unfortunately, it didn't get much better. I've got notes that I wrote for myself on this one, and my note for this set of slides just says the 80s sucked. No, so the 70s left, and with the 70s leaving, the sexual revolution that had started to empower women and started to allow a lot of people to explore their sexuality left with it, and the 80s closed things down again. Shoujo manga took off commercially, which was great. There's a lot of great shoujo manga that came out at that point. But what it meant is that a lot of these Yuri manga, many of which were published in shoujo magazines, again, our focus on first relationships, children growing up, really fed into what shoujo manga tends to be about, as I think anyone who reads a lot of shoujo can probably tell you, that those themes come through very clearly. Turns out that writing stories about girls falling in love with girls for their first relationship was still too risky for the shoujo genre that was now becoming heavily commercialized. So an awful lot of these stories and an awful lot of the people who were trying to tell them got gently put out to pasture. Which, well, sucks. But on the other hand, we did invent magical girls, and I'm going to put Juniper on the spot here and say who did the magical girl panel earlier, and say how common is Yuri subtext in magical girl series?
It's pretty dang common. It's
everywhere.
All the hand holding.
Oh yeah.
We're not calling it Yuri, but we're casting these two main characters as Romeo and Juliet, and nobody's batting an eyelid.
And in those we have to make them cousins.
Why are they kissing, Mummy?
It's funny that you should say that, because... 1994 brought us a magical girl series that decided to put subtext aside for a moment. Sailor Moon S, the third series, brought us. Well, I'm too fast at talking, and they're going to show up in about 30 seconds. So never mind.
This is the season 1 opening. They won't appear in this one.
Sure isn't.
A lot of blooming flower imagery, though.
This is the season 1 opening.
I think it is as well, yeah.
Yeah, the season 3 opening had different music.
Yeah, because only 3 of them dance across.
Yeah.
Sorry, Tom. Oh well, shit sucks to be me. Yes. Never mind. Anyway, Sailor Moon S brought Sailors Uranus and Neptune, who were, well, while it is never explicitly stated, the voice actors were told explicitly to play their characters as if they were a married couple. We'll ignore the contents of the American dubs and the American versions because that can get in the scene. But yes, and once again, tying back to our existing thread, of course, Haruka is able to change gender at will, which is a nice power, I'm sure. Actually, that does sound like a nice power. Very nice power. But anyway, which once again amps up their energy even further, I think. Though some questions to be raised about if the only lesbian relationship in the show involves someone who can also turn into a man. There's something to weigh in there, isn't there? There's some consideration to make.
It's kind of up in the air. It's never ever explicitly stated that she can swap gender. It's more like an identity thing with her. It's more she dresses masculine.
There's a visually, she's certainly drawn without boobs in a number of scenes, but whether that's creative dress or creative license is unclear. You're right.
There is official artwork of Haruka like dressed in other outfits, so it does make it more explicit. There's also bikini pictures.
Yeah.
So.
At the very least, she's very masculine coded, but masculine coded in a way which is very the review.
Takarazuka?
Yep.
Yeah.
Include that.
It had a very real impact on anime and manga, and from around about the mid-90s things came back. But speaking of masculine coded, it only took Ikara, the director of Sailor Moon, 3 years to go from that to this. So he had no brakes. No brakes at all on that train. Utena brought back the Prince archetype in its arguably most iconic form to this day. Utena wasn't born into, pushed into the role. Utena chose to be the prince. She chose to rescue the girl, and she chose to leave with her. Some people argue about whether Utena and Anthe's relationship is in fact a romantic one. They can also get in the sea.
Yes, it is!
They're wrong. Anyway, it's nice being here because no one can really argue with me that much. But yes. So Utena really took the Prince archetype to the next level, and Utena managed not to be just a girl who was dressed as a man, or a girl who was pretending to be a man, or as some of the other previous manga have been, effectively they were written as a man but drawn with boobs. Utena walks both paths in a very effective way that makes her relatable to an awful lot of people on all sorts of ways, or on all sorts of parts of the LGBT and gender spectrum, which is awesome. Good job, Ikihara. However, I've got one more note from the 1990s. So we'll just skip straight into... Because Ikihara was not the only person pushing boundaries in relationships in anime during the late 90s. Plant were pushing boundaries in many ways and directions, some of which they probably shouldn't have done, but nonetheless...
That is true.
Absolutely. Wow, that fade was more dramatic than I remembered it being when I edited the video. But yes. Cardcaptor Sakura showcases many relationships in all sorts of different things. Let's all pretend that the ones between the schoolgirls and their teachers don't happen. going away from that. Anyway, I joke about that, but seriously, like, if that's your thing, great, but keep it in anime, please. No, there is some conversation to be had over the main lesbian characters in coded into Kaikappa Sakura. The archetype of the jealous lesbian friend who maybe gets in the way of her partner's relationship isn't always the healthiest thing. As you can see, I feel like that picture very much typifies their relationship in the show.
She doesn't get in the way of it though.
But yes, so there are questions to be raised over that, and it's only reinforced by Tomoyo's mother, who we realise was also interested in Sakura's mother and tried to break up that relationship. Go for it, what are you going to say?
Complicated by the fact that she's got a crush on her brother's best friend, who clearly has a crush on her brother.
Yeah? Oh yeah, there's some... I love Clamp, don't you? Yeah, I love Clamp and I love their love tetrahedrons. They're wonderful. But you know, I think there's, while I think it would be wrong not to note it, I think we also need to sometimes admit that sometimes our icons are a little bit more problematic in hindsight than possibly we would ideally like, even if I still love the show. So that's my note on there. But I'm going to slide on into going back into print. Again, it's keeping with the 90s. While anime was loving its print-type girls, SK was very, very, very strongly still holding the torch in manga. In the mid-90s, we saw me pressing the back button accidentally while I'm trying to check my notes. I'm going to stop doing that. I lie. I'm going to keep doing that almost certainly. Blue saw a very down-to-earth version of the story, where our characters were a little bit more mature, having had relationships in the past, including with men, and it was set in a small country town in rural Japan. It tells the story of two, again, teenage girls finding some solace and some healing in and with each other. There's a lot of drama. And again, we see a new spin on and then they have to be separated at the end. We've still not got over that. Where in this case, our heroine leaves her small town to go back to Tokyo, which, again, carries some implications that I'm not too fond of, but nonetheless, this was the 90s and this was where we were at. Oh my god, I'm just the worst at this. It also introduced that, where the mangaka thought, I've read Yoshio Nobuko. I'm just going to write her story at least 6 times in the same manga. Approximately every single pairing, there's a couple that aren't, but almost every single pairing in this manga, and there's a lot, follows the SK stereotypes. We have the younger, more innocent girl, codified now to have pigtails almost always, and keep watch on those pigtails because they ain't going anywhere. And we have the older, traditional Yamato Nadeshiko style beauty, who is a little bit more mature, cooler, keeps a cool head. And we see the same the same stereotypes and the same relationships run through a lot. Which is not to say it's bad. Sorry? It is a Catholic school as well, yes.
So when the Buddhist character gets introduced though in that series?
Yes, yeah, okay. So I don't think this is a bad series, and when I say it follows the stereotypes and it runs across that, I'm making a panel about this genre. If I didn't like the stereotypes, I wouldn't be here. You know, I've got we've not got much but the stereotypes to roll on a lot of the time. The good tropes. Nothing wrong with good trope used well. But anyway, Minamicon very much used those tropes, but it also built upon them and evolved them a little bit. And again, you can see many things taking their roots back. Well, as I say, the codifying of the hair colours is an interesting one that you will definitely see. However, the millennium brought us something new, or maybe old.
Here we go.
I'm still trying to
Fight literature here.
I know, right? No, people realised in the early 2000s that in fact a lot of men really liked the idea of girls kissing. It turned out it was not a hard sell. And Strawberry Panic and some other shows of its time ran with that. Strawberry Panic borrowed every single thing that you saw in Minamicon and tuned it up for a male audience. We saw restrictive high school uniforms that show off the boobs. We were promised a peek through the curtains into a world that's only girls. It was very much designed to tease men, and it succeeded. It is undeniable that from around about this point onwards, I won't say Strawberry Panic was the progenitor, but it's certainly one of the very first. We see that stream of Yuri shows aimed also at men. Not necessarily exclusively, some shows managed to hit both lines. But, you know, that and the other piece of deeply questionable literature there, Kanaduki no Miko, which I have neglected to, I have deliberately neglected to include anything from, showcased its girls with giant robots fighting enemies, and let's just say some deeply non-consensual things that I'd rather not have seen, frankly. Not my jam. But it ran through there. At the same time, as well as dedicated series like this, we saw the evolution of some of the other things in maybe more mainstream or more broad appeal shows, or shows that just weren't specifically targeted at an audience that was looking for Yuri. The early millennium saw some magical girls, as we have done ever since. And in 3 seasons, we went from which I'm sure you can all understand is a very straight thing to think when you see your enemy across the battlefield. Totally and utterly. And 2 seasons later, again, I can't say that Lyrical Nanaho was the first to integrate things, but it was certainly one of the ones to take, shall I say, take the concept of subtext and give it a very swift kicking under the rug. Though they did pretend for a little bit at the end of the first season, which was weird.
There are a bunch of teasers that never actually show them kiss.
You're not wrong, but we do see that they sleep in the same bed.
My favourite euphemism that they use in the third series when they're sleeping in the same bed is that they often stay overnight for strategic planning sessions.
It's like about 4 hours.
Yeah. So obviously, who hasn't stayed overnight in the same bed with their same gender friend for a strategic planning session repeatedly and often while you both are working adults with full-time jobs and then you adopt a child together? Who hasn't done that, frankly? That's a totally normal thing to do.
Let's discuss tank movements together.
And I've got one more note I would like to make about things in shows that have a primarily male audience. I'm wondering how many people identified that one. But the 2000s saw a very notable set of light novels leading into an anime in the Monogatari series. But I wanted to draw attention to one particular character, the star of this one here, seeing they're getting slapped. Kamaro, who is one of the earliest characters I can find in anime who explicitly states that she is a lesbian. The word she uses. She does not say Yuri, with its connotations of being a shoujo genre, its history of playfulness and of first relationship myths that we've seen. Kamaro outright states, "I am a lesbian," which has a much more serious connotation. Japanese women will use the word lesbian Japanese lesbian women will use the word lesbian. That is their preferred term, spelt in katakana. And I think it's notable to see that in anime. Kamaro is a definitely straight character. No, Kamaro is definitely not. And in fact, her entire role and place in the series is based around mocking the main character by being sexually forward to him when he knows she's fully not interested, and that's the entire character. That's not the entire character, there's more to her than that. Monogatari characters are really good, you should probably watch the show. Anyway, but I think it's worth noting. That said, we got a few more exciting treats around this time. What we got was some specific genre publications. In 2003, a magazine called Yuri launched, which was wonderful if you were into Yuri, until it shut down 2 years later. Sad. However, at the same time, Yuri launched. Has anyone heard of Yuri before?
Yeah.
Good, okay, phew. I was like, is this going to, does nobody know? Okay, Yuri is the biggest Yuri publication to this day. It started out running every 2 months, as it was here. However, that didn't stop them 2 years later from launching Yuri S. Can you guess what the difference in target audience between those two? And as with our previous slide, we started to see what initially we started with the very shoujo manga aesthetic on the left. We also started to see the things targeted, again, the more male targeted things. Short skirt, the little flash of midriff, etc., etc. And you'll find an awful lot of those magazines, well, you'll find a number of those magazines still on sale now, and still leaning on the Strawberry Panic, No Men Allowed, often printed directly as a subtitle on the magazine.
Justice for girls.
Let's make a magazine aimed at men and print No Men Allowed on the top. Well, it's a decision. It worked for them, clearly. Having these dedicated spaces meant that there was a lot more time for a lot more new artists to write a lot more stories. And what did they write? They wrote You're supposed to do that.
君がいてよかったそれは一番
They wrote the same story with the same characters. Aihana is a very good story, and it's a very good rendition of those tropes. But it is the same tropes. Look at our energetic younger girl with light-coloured hair, our taller, slightly older partner. Now she's got glasses, which is a brand new intervention. A brand new invention. But,
Way less secure though.
what's up?
Kumi's way less secure as a lead though than like character. Only some of the feelings positive.
She is. You're right. She is much. She is much more insecure. There is more evolution in there. But I think the important point we're getting across here is that shows like Aihana, or manga like Aihana and like Sasameki Koto, which are both very good, very much were rehashing the same tropes, throwing my phone on the floor, and a slow evolution rather than any revolution at this time. What was happening back in reality? Let's just take off our anime glasses for a second and see what was going on. What's that? Sorry?
I said I don't like it. Turn back on.
In 2009, men and women were allowed to marry people of the same gender abroad. And that remains the case right now. Gay and lesbian people in Japan are allowed to get married as long as they go abroad to a country where gay marriage is legal, get married, and then come back, and then the Japanese government will register it.
Hawaii then?
I mean,
Haven't certain prefectures now
Yeah.
allowed it for where they are?
I will talk about a couple of things. No. You're quite right.
Yeah.
You're not quite right, but you're getting there. There's some things there. That said, there was some other slow progression. There were a number of court cases through the early 2000s that ruled against things like it used to be legal to have policies preventing same-gender couples from renting together, which was now illegal. Good. As it should be. It feels a bit ridiculous to be cheering things that basically should be just accepted and normal, but nonetheless, I think we have to recognise the trend and where things are going. The 2010s then, getting closer to reality, saw a lot more things. There are now, Yuri Hime now has some friends. And there were multiple Yuri magazines that came out. Yuri Hime moved to printing monthly, which meant more of the same stories and more mangaka slowly going insane trying to produce a new chapter every month in a small one-room apartment on their own, because the Japanese manga industry is definitely healthy. I also saw Yuri Hime Wild Rose launch. I can see by the grins that a few people know that Wild Rose was their more 18+ oriented publication. Yes. Which changed name and folded into something else by now, but nonetheless, it brought out a little bit more of a market. We also saw anthologies coming out, with things like Eclair there, which remain an important part of the Yuri publishing sort of subculture to this day. Anthologies present a way every 6 months for new artists, new writers to get a short story out there, many of which end up going on to be serialized if they're popular. It also allows established authors to write something a bit different and exciting and new. And we saw some themed anthologies, like Parfait, which focuses on specifically on age gap Yuri. Sure. Anyway.
Moving swiftly on.
Why are they all named after sweets? I don't really have a good answer to that one, other than, yet again, our association with things young girls like. So maybe we've not moved on as much as we would have hoped to by now. That said, we've also seen a lot of live events, which have been great. There are Yuri-specific events where doujin artists can sell and advertise, and fan events where people can meet authors and things like that. Yuri over this time grew into a much more accepted and widely known subculture, and indeed over this period we started to see Yuri sections opening up in places like Animate and in some bookstores, where they would specifically hive off this as a genre, as things that people were looking for, which was great. We saw some anime too. Do you want to watch some more anime? Let's watch some more anime. We saw a lot of anime in this period, and I'm not going to show you intros for everyone because we'll be here for the rest of the convention. In fact, we could have been here for the whole convention. There's a lot, not that much actually. I say a lot, only compared to what we get before. There's still less Yuri comes out than Isekai.
Literally anything.
I mean, you're not wrong, but I still don't like it.
Give us the Yuri
Yes. I mean, I'd watch it. There actually haven't been many Yuri isekais other than the villainous ones. There's been a few villainous type ones that have done it, but anyway. Shows like Citrus and Bloom Into You, both adapted from manga. Explored some slightly different things. You look at Bloom Into You and, hey look, we've got a shorter girl with light-coloured hair and, oh wait, she's not the one who's blushing and realising what's going on. It's actually the older girl who's the first to realise and make a move. I mean, it's a small step in terms of moving away from our tropes, but hey, at least it's a step. No one's interested in my recommendations, but no, yes. Citrus is not awful, but it's also not great.
Yes.
And more, we saw some other things. I'm just being a bit self-indulgent here. Uraseko Picnic, again, takes actually a fairly major step away from our tropes, which is nice. There is, like, in Uraseko Picnic, the swap the hair colours, that's a start. Okay, maybe not. Okay, being serious, no. Uraseko Picnic tells a horror story about Japanese urban legends. Which just happens to have some main characters that are gay, which is nice. It's an interesting and important step, I think, in that it says, well, I don't need to make a show that's just about a romance. Because when you're talking about lesbianism and its depiction in anime and manga, it's very easy to focus on romance. Right? That's the obvious genre. I can see that it doesn't have to. You can tie things together in a way that's definitely not gay. Okay.
What is it called?
Urisekai Picnic.
My interests, Tom. Why have you not told me about this before?
I think I did. I said to you, it's not about mythology, but it's about urban legends. I don't know if it'd be your thing, but it exists.
You don't remember that?
I think we were in the middle of playing RP. Anyway, while Adachi Shimomura tells a much more true story of teenage girls discovering their sexuality, with a bit more of a focus on what it means to them and how it feels to them to make the realizations as they realize and then slowly feel their way towards coming out to each other. Again, a lovely story and well worth watching. So if you're keeping track, no, yes, yes, yes. Adachi Toshimamura. And have we had any effect? Well, in 2015, starting with Shibuya, and over a year, oh, not that one, we got same-sex partnerships legalized, which is nice. It's not marriage, but it's a step, as we saw in the UK, right? Civil partnerships were a very solid step that led inevitably to the legalization of marriage. So we can only hope that Japan is going to follow the same path. In 2017, we saw a gay couple accepted as foster parents, which again is a nice step. There's been no official movement on rights, but it certainly paves the way for future requests, future changes. In 2018 rather, I'm really good at this. I literally give presentations for my job. I don't know how I'm doing this so badly today. In 2018, discrimination, again, there was an anti-discrimination law passed in Tokyo, followed by Ibaraki, and then nowhere else, because that sucks. But it made a number of things change. That changed a number of things, including passing laws about bullying, about discrimination in bullying in schools, and about education in schools, meaning that Japanese children are now taught about the existence of gay and lesbian people, which is nice. Feel like it's a fact that people should probably be aware of. Would be good. And a lot of progress on policies on housing, on other things. We also saw, we've also seen gay men and transgender men and women all elected to office in various parts of Japan, and no gay women yet, but I can only hope that that's coming. However, at a poll in 2018, 65% of LGBT people in Japan said they are not yet out to anyone at home or work, mostly citing fear of discrimination as the reason why. So as much as I'm painting a picture of things moving in the right direction, fuck that, frankly. Nonetheless, the latter end of the 2000s, or the 2010s, and into the last few years, I've seen a real change in who is making Yuri. Because, you know, when we're looking back, and you think about the people that I've mentioned, right? One of the major turning points I talked about for a while there was Ikuhara, a man. And of course Clank was in there, but I think there's something to be said, there's something to be noted about how many men have been so influential in this genre up until now. And it's been one of the most heartening things to see recently has been a huge number of women, and in particular of lesbian and bisexual women who have got involved in making and writing things for the genre. We saw we saw things like we saw people like Takemiya Jin, who writes Hitoshi Koishi there, who's writing, who is an out lesbian herself, and whose writing includes an awful lot of Japanese lesbian slang, which is very much things that would only be within the in-group, and to a degree writing for that group, which is good progress. We saw people like Minamoto Hisanari, author of Fufu, I believe released as Wife and Wife in the UK, in the West, who writes an awful lot about, who writes stories about being a lesbian and being in a lesbian relationship in Japan, which are very much address, well, adults, good start, but also address some things from a bit more serious an angle, and address the problems that they may have or may encounter in different situations. I actually don't know if Minamoto-san is gay or not. I have no information on that one, but certainly her writing reads very down to earth and brings in concepts that others have told me. I am not a lesbian who lives in Japan, but others have told me reflects very well on history, or not on history, on society. And Nagata Kabi, for whom my notes have literally just said say Nagata Kabi, because I could talk to you about Nagata Kabi for a long time. I won't. I will save you that one. I will just tell you to go and read her works. Nagata Kabi writes autobiographical manga that chart her struggles with a number of things, including, life, yes, depression, her sexuality, an awful lot of things. Her first manga, My Lesbian Experience with Loneliness, starts out with her reflecting on, with her aged in her early 30s, waiting in a hotel room for a female sex worker who she's called because she had a crisis, that she had a mental health crisis after realizing after thinking about how she'd not had sex yet, and wondering how her life came to there. At the end of the first manga, you will find yourself thinking, "Are you okay?" By the start of the fourth volume, My Alcoholic Escape from Reality, I think the title tells you the answer.
Man.
Read Nagata Kabi, she is brilliant. And also, read Nagata Kabi because, for God's sake, that woman needs the royalties. If you could do anything for her, that's at least that. And finally, visual novels, which are a genre I haven't mentioned on, have been jumping into the space and exploring a lot more. With things like Monolith Soft Seabed as a fantastic example I want to point to. There's some disagreement right there, but which again explores an adult lesbian woman dealing with loss and overcoming a number of issues in her life while maintaining work and other things. Is it perfect? No. But is it certainly more interesting? More interesting in terms of representation. Your mileage may vary on how interesting it may be in other ways than various other Yuri visual novels we've seen before about sexy nurses and similar things. So we're making steps somewhere. Where are we going next then? Not backwards, because I'm still not really good at this remote. I guess I do normally sit in front of one of these when I'm doing it. So, where to next? We've got some recent things. In 2021, a court in Sapporo ruled that the ban on same-sex marriage in Japan was unconstitutional. bloody big ruling, which has not changed the law yet. The law remains in place, however, it very much is paving the way for that, and there have been discussions, serious discussions in Japanese politics about doing that. It currently seems to be an electoral issue, which again is upsetting because it shouldn't be. It should just be a default, but never mind. We've also seen Yuri becoming more and more popular. That explosion of titles that we saw over the last few years keeps going. The popularity of the anthologies, the number of magazines is ever increasing, and the number of people, and that means the number of people in there increase. And the increase in the number of voices means an increase in the number of minority voices. It means an increase in the number of lesbian women who are able to write in the area. It means an increase in the number of transgender women who are able to write in the area. It means an increase in all sorts of angles from all sorts of people, which can only be positive for everyone. The wider a variety of voices we get, the broader the genre becomes, and the broader the genre has become. Because in many ways, the sorts of titles we saw on the last slide are miles and miles away from the explorations of sisterhood, the piles of subtext, and the breakups at the end that we have seen throughout this history. A number of things remain popular, right? There are still stories about all girls schools, and you know what? There always will be, because there is always a new generation of people coming up, and a new generation of girls for whom actually the idea of being if they're realizing they're gay, the idea of being in a school like the one they're in, only everyone is like them, is a really appealing fantasy, and I wouldn't want to deny anyone that just because we might have seen it 100 times. Doesn't mean there's not a 12-year-old in Japan opening that manga and getting to realize, oh, these people are like me, and that's okay. But things Yuri aimed at men exists and will always exist. I don't think that's a problem. I don't think that's an issue. Any more than I think the fact that most of the BL genre being aimed at women is an issue. At the end of the day, it's not. That's okay. People can like what they like and enjoy their fantasies. But I do think it's important that as our creators have grown up, especially now, today's creators are writing about the world that they want to see and about the problems and situations that they find themselves in. Today's heroines, unlike those of the 80s, get to walk away, getting married, having lives together and being happy if the author wants them to. And sometimes they do and sometimes they don't. But we see we see visions of the reality and visions of the world that people want to see and want to show us. And I think both are worthwhile. Both are important, and really, that's the job of fiction, right? I'm going to end with the PV for a Yuri that I think is frankly wonderful. That starts off with the same aesthetic that you think and follows its characters as they realise, as they grow, and through graduation, working and now slowly working their way towards adulthood. And that's where I think I'll stop and let you enjoy until we have some questions, or not. Because they sound wonderful.
wholesome until the wet t-shirt.
That's probably the most wholesome wet t-shirt you'll see in a long time. You can't see anything. Kaze-san.
Kaze-san of Morning Glory.
It was released in Japanese cinemas. It's available as an OVA. The OVA is good. The manga tells the long story.
God, why couldn't we have got a series with it, a TV series with it? Why?
Oh yeah. Kaze-san with the brown hair very much becomes our most modern evolution of the prince type. They've turned by now into our school beating athlete. Look at how strong she is. You're not wrong.
And bring it to me if I don't get back in time?
Sure, where will you be? Minamicon?
Yeah, I think it's going to bring
Yeah, I know, right? That's what I think. You might hate me, but... Yeah. Just make me fucking sucks. Homosexuals.
Just go out into like a field of like rape scenes and just like
My one's going to be sponsored by antihistamines.
Yeah. That would be the best antihistamine commercial.
Yeah.
I was taking
Loratadine.
Alright, that's all I've got. I've run over time because when I timed this panel a few days ago, it was 5 minutes over time, and I thought, shall I cut down my panel for Minami? I should probably do that. Then I played Final Fantasy XIV. And now I've run 5 minutes over time again, which should surprise absolutely no one, least of all me.
Was that the free part?
But yeah.